we've reached the final part of our video of this question also. So basically the last part is basically your interpretation questions, right? Sorry about that. Yeah, but the last part of this is just basically interpretation questions, and these are like the last questions they'll ask you in functions. It's a bit tricky, they're a bit tricky, but everything they'll ask you it's gonna be everything you have done in the graph. So that's what I'm saying, that whenever you reach this like this last part of the question, always like label everywhere. So I'm labeling A as negative 2 and 0, and then B was 2 and 0, and then C was 0 and 4, right? So with this type of questions is that this type of questions just test your understanding, right? So yeah, so I think I've plotted every point, né? And then we have the point of origin. So we know that this point of origin here, it's just 0 and 0, right? And then now they're asking you right now, for which values of x is f of x basically, so now they're using inequalities, so it also needs you to apply your knowledge of algebra here. So they're just asking you for which values of x, right, is f of x less than g of x, less than the graph of g, right? Or another way they can say it is that, where is the graph of g of x greater than the graph of f? So let's use different colors. This one, I want you to really pay good attention. Eh? So I'm gonna label the graph of f with using the color yellow, right? I'm gonna use the yellow color. I'm gonna use the yellow color. And then the graph of g, I'm gonna use the green color, right? I'm gonna use the green color so that you can see. Okay, now the question says now, for which values of x, right? So we're only gonna look at the values of x. These values of x, we're just going to look at them. The 2 and the negative 2 is the 0. We're just only going to look at them. So now they're asking us now. So I say that, where is g of x basically bigger than f of x? Or where do you see that the graph of g is above the graph of f? So the graph of g, so if you look at here, which graph is above? It's the graph of f, right? Because f is, you can see that it's moving downwards there, and the graph of f is actually bigger here. So the graph of f is bigger, it's 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 bigger. Everywhere here the graph of f will be bigger. But when we reach this point, I want you to stop. When you reach this point here, the point of where the graph cuts, I want you to stop and analyze, because something is going to happen. It changes. You start to see that the graph of f, can you see that it's a straight line, right? And the graph of f is not above the graph of g, because you can see that if it were to be above the graph of g, you would actually agree that it would be somewhere around here, right? It would be around here. If it had to be greater, it would be around here. But in this case, it's not. So it's not above there. It was only above there when it was below it. But now that it's above it, but now that it's below the graph of g, we can now see that the graph of g is actually above the graph of f. And then I'm just going to use this blue color to show that the graph of g, I just want to show you that the graph of g is actually above the graph of f here, around here, everywhere here. The graph of g will be greater. But now, for which values of x is this graph above the graph of f, right? So we know that, okay, in this case, I know that, oh, so it's only, so we also know that there's also a point of intersection. So that means that the inequality would actually behave like this. It's when x will be greater than negative 2. So x is greater than negative 2, but less than 0. Can you see? Because then at 0, this, remember, the coordinate form is in the form of x is to y. X is to y is in the coordinate form, and here it's x is to y is in the coordinate form. But we're only taking the values of x. And the values of x is when x is greater than negative 2, but less than 0. Then the graph of f will be less than the graph of g, because the graph of g of x is basically above the graph of f of x, if that makes sense. I'm trying to make sense of it. So try to say that where is the graph of g basically just above the graph of f, because if it's above the graph of f, that means f is basically small. And then here we don't see the straight line f of x existing here. So we just ignore this part here. We just ignore all of these because it doesn't apply here. We don't see the graph of f of x here. So it only exists between the points -2 and 0. So it's when x is greater than -2 and less than 0, right? And another one was also that if they had included that, let's say that f of x was less than or equals to g of x, or equals to g of x, where they say equals to, you just included 2. But in this case, they never put they never included it, so we just leave it as it is and say where x is greater than -2 or less than 0. And then that's the interpretation of this question. I hope you understand that part of it, and I hope it makes sense to someone, you know. Let me just pause this, and then I'm gonna do 5.5.5.2 in separate pages, né? Just so that we keep everything in order.